ones that make you feel alright, the kind you want to stay up with all night. You gotta find your people, the ones that make you feel whole, who won't leave your side when you lose control, the ones that don't let you lose your soul. Oh, you gotta find your people, you know, the ones that get the joke, who understand what you're saying before a word is spoken. You gotta find your people that put the needle in the groove. When you're together, you got nothing to prove. When you're together, you got nothing to lose. In a world full of strangers, you don't know who to trust. All you see is danger, trying to find what you lost. You can't go it alone, everybody needs help. Oh, you gotta find your people, then you find yourself. You gotta find your people that'll call your bluff, who will ride along when the road is rough. You gotta find your people, the ones that make you feel equal. They pick you up and don't put you down, help you find your way through the lost and found. In a world full of strangers, you don't know who to trust. All you see is danger, trying to find what you lost. You can't go it alone, everybody needs help. Oh, you gotta find your people, then you'll find yourself. The ones that understand you, the ones that lend a hand to you, the ones that don't demand anything from you. You gotta find your people, the ones that make you feel alright, that'll tell you the truth and wish you well. You gotta find your people, then you'll find yourself. Oh, you gotta find your people, then you'll find yourself. Oh, oh.
We have always believed that church was not just what we do when we gather for an hour in a week at a particular place. Church is really about so much more than that. It's about community and finding your people and being plugged in places like real community. That's where real church happens. I often say small group is where real church happens. Finding your people and learning how to do life together while we journey closer to God, that's really where it's at. In 1986, Christopher Knight was 20 years old. He was emotionally distant from his family, and he had no real friends. And he was living surrounded by people, but he really felt completely alone. So one day, with no real plan and no real significant thought to it at all, he quit his job where he worked as an installer for home security systems, and he cashed his last paycheck, and he got in his car, and he just started driving. He was in Boston, and he started driving south, again, no plan, and he would stay in cheap hotels, and he would eat fast food, and when he got to Florida, again, with no plan, he just decided, I don't know about this. He turned the car around, and he started driving north again. He made his way all the way to Maine, which is where he grew up, so he's kind of familiar with it. When he got to Maine, he drove on the main road as far as he could, then he got off the main road and onto the secondary road. Then he got off the secondary road and he got onto the gravel road. Then he got off the gravel road and he got onto the dirt road. And he drove the dirt road as far into the wilderness of Maine as he possibly could. And when he got to the end of that road, the car was basically out of gas. He got out of the car, he tossed his keys onto the dashboard, and he walked alone into the wilderness where he remained completely alone for the next 27 years. Nearly 3 decades all by himself. No human interaction. Now, survival was tricky because he knew how to hunt and he knew how to fish, but did I mention he didn't have a plan? So he had no knife, he had no gun, he had no tackle. Maine is a pretty brutal place to try to survive in the wilderness. It's kind of a short season for gathering berries and vegetation, so foraging for survival was really not a plan. And he finally realized he built this home outside of like this rock formation. He just kind of threw some stuff together, and he realized that there were some cabins that people would use from time to time a few miles away in this little community. But nobody lived there like year round. So do you remember his one job before he quit and started this crazy adventure was installing home security systems? So for 27 years, in spite of the guilt that plagued him for doing what he knew was wrong, he stole food from empty cabins. He would take 3 things. He would take food, batteries, and propane. That's all he took. In fact, the community started to realize that somebody was taking their food. I mean, it's not like, the first time, like, hey, did you eat the Cheerios? Because I thought we had Cheerios, but we don't have any Cheerios. And it's like, I don't know what happened to the Cheerios, right? But after a while, you're like, I think somebody's, like it's Goldilocks. I think somebody's like actually taking our food here. And the whole community starts talking about it, and they realize that he never takes anything of value. Like he doesn't vandalize anything. He's respectful of our place. All he's taking is food, and they feel sorry for him. They start leaving him notepads and a pen so he can make a grocery list. That's the truth. But he's super careful. He won't engage in that. He won't leave a list. Local law enforcement thought that they were dealing with a highly skilled professional thief because his crime scenes were meticulous. He never took more than he needed. He used darkness as his cover. He always only broke into unoccupied, empty cabins. He even locked the door on the way out. As a matter of fact, he said he learned where everybody kept their spare key. He had keys to all the cabins. In 2013, after 27 years alone, he finally was arrested. They caught him stealing food at that lakeside camp. He was charged with burglary and theft, and he was sentenced to time served 7 months. His arrest made national news, and people were kind of fascinated by this. And while he was in jail, he got letters and visitors from people all over the country. Over 500 journalists requested an interview. He only granted one interview, 9 one-hour sessions to one person, which is how we got this story. There was a documentary film crew showed up with all their cameras and gear. A woman asked him, he had never met, asked him to marry her. I don't know what that's about. Knight said that he could not accurately describe what it felt like to spend such an immense period of time alone. Silence, he said, does not translate into words after a while. In fact, he said, solitude bestows an increase in something valuable. He said, I can't dismiss that. Solitude increased my perception, but here's the tricky thing. I want to show you this. He said, when I applied my increased perception to myself, I lost my identity. There was no audience, no one to perform for. I became irrelevant. There's a mild fascination that maybe I'm not the only one that feels when they hear stories like this. Somebody who separates from all human contact and lives off the grid, for a while. And there's a place for healthy solitude. I'm not talking about, that. There's something healing and life-giving to closing all the outside distractions and simply communing with God for a time, but not forever. Not for years, certainly not for decades, right? Part of our divine design is community. We were made for family and society and togetherness. Now, you might not be a people person, but you have people. You might be one of those folks who, tongue-in-cheek, sort of half serious, half joking, says, I don't even like people. But you like some of them. Even if it's just a very few, it still counts. We were meant to do life not in isolation, but with each other. And I want to prove it to you, at least just for a minute. One of God's earliest observations about the earliest human beings was this. The Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. And I want you to think about this. In the entire creation account, which you can read in the early pages of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, The rhythmic refrain of God's daily conclusion after he makes stuff every day is, it was good. God saw the sun and the moon and the stars that he had set into place, and it was good. He saw the animals that he had just fabricated, and he declared about all of them, it was good. God gazed upon the vast variety of flora and herbage and all the vegetation and spewing its greenery and fruit, and he declares that it is good. Every day, God's declarative statement was that it was good until he creates Adam, humanity, and he calls that day very good. And you might have heard me talk about that before, but then there was something I'd never seen before. I'd never thought about this until I really felt like God sort of put this on me. I always saw good, 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 and very good, but then there is an about face. The first grade that isn't an A. The first evaluation that God marked with a needs to improve. Why? Because it's not good for man to be alone. And I've only ever interpreted this text as it relates to marriage. I thought that's what it meant. Because, it makes sense. God's solution after this moment is to create for Adam his wife. But I think my conclusion has been too limited. I think it's been too confined. And what if God had a grander vision? A world where people lived side by side really well in community, not just in marriage, which I'm a fan of, by the way. This is certainly how the rest of the story plays out after Adam and Eve. Community was life-giving, or supposed to be. You and I were not made for isolation. We were made for association. We're not supposed to be sequestered. We're supposed to be invested in each other. We are better together. We're better for each other. Except when we're not, because we don't always treat each other that way. Better, that is. But we can. We really can. And from time to time, it's worthwhile, it's healthy and helpful for us to step back and revisit not just God's declaration that it's not good for us to be alone, but also his prescription for how we can live well in our not aloneness. And that is what this series that we launched today is about. We're going to look at 4 components, 4 virtues, if you will, that all of us need to cultivate. We need to keep in front of us. We need to deploy for the improvement of our own lives, yes, but also for the lives of people around us. Side by side, we really can do life well if we will follow God's plan for living that way. So today, the first of 4 components, and you're really going to love it, Paul says, and now I will show you the most excellent way. Paul writes this letter, the Apostle Paul, you might have heard him called that. This is 1 Corinthians. So he writes this letter. This is a letter he writes to the church in Corinth, a church that he planted in modern-day Greece. And he's been, before this moment, because we're at the end of chapter 12, he's been teaching them precisely how they could be the most effective possible by working together, side by side. And he's been teaching them about their gifts. And he says, listen, God gave some of you the gift of compassion or mercy. And others of you, he gave the gift of leadership. And some of you, he gave the gift of wisdom. And others, he gave the gift of preaching. And some, he gave the gift of service. And on he goes. And he goes out of his way to say, listen, every gift is needed. Every person is wanted. Everybody is equally important, even though we're not all assigned the same gift. And what he says is, essentially, listen, God assembles this gift matrix so that we're effective. What I lack is what you have. And together, what happens is we become synergistic and potent and creative and thoughtful and tenacious and innovative. We become all that God wants us to be. When God's people are side by side, operating within our individual giftedness, well, our collective effort produces divine level results. That's the way it's supposed to work. But there is a secret. So after Paul finishes these ingredients, there's this one extra ingredient that will function like the glue that binds the individual gifts together. This is the characteristic that will define not only the church, but anybody who claims to be a follower of Jesus, and how we're supposed to exist side by side with Anyone, everyone. And now I will show you the most excellent way. I may be able to speak the languages of men and even of angels, but if I have not love, my speech is no more than a noisy gong or a clanging bell. I can have the gift of inspired preaching. I can have all knowledge and understand all secrets. I can have all the faith I need to move a mountain, but if I have not love, I am nothing. I can give up my body to be martyred, but if I have not love, it does me no good. Love then is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or conceited or proud. Love is not ill-mannered or selfish or irritable. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. It's not happy with evil, but it is happy with truth. Love never gives up. Its faith, hope, and patience never fail. Love is eternal. So we don't put people on the spot at our church. So if you just want to be silent about this, you can. But I'm just going to ask this question, and you can respond however you want. Have you ever heard this text before? Yeah. My guess is that everybody here, most everybody at least, has heard some version of this. Even if church has not been your thing, which I'm glad you're here, by the way, if that's you. You're not alone. There's plenty of folks that church has not been their thing. They're trying to figure out spiritual truth by coming here today. So even if that's you, 1 Corinthians 13, which is known as the love chapter, is read at pretty much every wedding, at least most of them, by hopefully good communicators and people who love God and believe in marriage, and I use it too. So well known, though, are these verses from 1 Corinthians 13 that most of us, if we're honest, we just kind of tune the words out. Or we simply think that they only apply to marriage since weddings are the most common use of this text. But listen, Paul wasn't really talking to married people. He wasn't just thinking about husbands and wives. He was thinking about all of us, because the most excellent way to live side by side is for us to love each other. Is to love each other. So love is a really broad word in our culture, isn't it? I mean, think about this. Think about how we use this word. I use the word love to convey my preference for my favorite football team, and the exact same word to tell you how I feel about my children. I mean, is that the same thing? No. But it's the same word. I love Ford trucks, and I love my mama. Really? I love Krispy Kreme, and I love Jesus. Well, that might actually be pretty close for some of us, just sorry to say. In fact, we did a poll, which you heard about earlier, and I don't keep my phone on for church, but I'm gonna pull it up here because I think it's interesting to just look at what people said. So we did this poll, and some of you have been voting this morning, and I just want to point out some interesting facts about it. Let's see, more people said that they love their pet than they said that they love their family. Okay, so that could be, I don't know. Lots of people said they love food. I want you to know I love you, about those of you food people. But you want to define what you love about food. Someone said you love a perfectly made peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'd like to hear more about that. It doesn't seem so technical to me. You just slap some stuff on. Clearly, that's insulting for you. Someone else in the food category said you love Chick-fil-A ice. Can we just say we just love all things Chick-fil-A? I mean, wouldn't that make us more holy? 2 people said you love church. I want to thank both of you right now and from the whole community. And then one person said they love Christmas. So I guess bah humbug to the rest of us. It's going to be a low turnout. And your campus differences are fascinating as well. People at ALIT love everything. So, and then there's, one campus that your pets rank higher than anything else on the list. So it's fascinating to me. The point is, though, we are confused. We're confused. Paul says that love is the most excellent way, but we don't always love each other in an excellent way. We don't even use the word the same way. So Paul wants to help us define it. What is it? And I want to dig into just some of the components of what love really means. And here's the point. Here's what I want us to do. I want us all to see if we can just take a step or two, not get overwhelmed by the whole list. Can we just figure out how to take a step or two towards living side by side together better in the context of wherever that is for you, my family, community, church, neighborhood, whatever that means. So I'm just going to talk about three of these characteristics that Paul names in this chapter, but it would be worth your while to look at the whole thing, what we just read, and hear from God directly about it. And if you don't hear me say anything else, this is the most important part. So lean up for this. My voice is irrelevant. You don't really need to hear from me. You need to hear from God. I'm just trying to broker the conversation, and I'm going to help you do that after we finish some time together today. So first, love is not self-seeking. Love is not self-seeking or selfish, as some translations say. So when I really love someone, I am committed to having more concern for their condition than for mine. If you truly love someone, their best interest supersedes your desire, so that if it comes down to two mutually exclusive options, love would dictate that I forego mine in favor of yours. One of my favorite stories about this is, forgive me if you've heard it before, is from 1140, the year 1140, a true story. It happened in Germany, where King Conrad III has defeated the Duke of Welf at this place called Weinsberg, kind of this walled castle community. And the king was determined, his next step, he won, his next step is to gather up all the men, and he's going to have them all executed, all the men from Weinsberg. And so their wives decide to try to negotiate safe passage. They proposed to King Conrad that he would let them go, let them walk out unharmed with whatever they could carry, whatever they can carry. And so Conrad agrees, and he's kind of waiting. He's smiling. He can't wait for the women and children to leave so he can gather up all the men and have them all executed. And he's waiting for that to happen. Imagine his surprise when the gates to this walled city open up, and the wives of Weinsberg come walking out, struggling under the weight of their own husbands, whom they are carrying on their shoulders. That's what love looks like. Maybe it's not always so grand, and maybe life itself doesn't always hang in the balance. Perhaps love is as simple as a group of people gathering at your campus on a Saturday morning and using the scarce resource of their own time so that they can go together side by side and help somebody in need. Maybe love is that family among us, knowing that kids all around us are in peril, and so they take their well laid out life plans, they put them on the table and slide them to the side and become a foster parent. And love is the rest of us watching that, not from a distance with some admiration, but actually digging in with them, pitching in to help them with supplies and groceries and paying some bills and some time. Love, true love, the kind that is not self-seeking. It's like my friends Mike and Ann Gafford. Years ago, long after their kids had grown and gone, just the two of them enjoying life together, they volunteered to be the host family for a foreign exchange student. And so this kid would come over and stay with them for a good while, and there were several to choose from, and that's how it worked, at least back then. You got to pick your student, but not Mike and Ann. They called the counselor's office and they said, here's what we want you to do. We want you to find the student that is having the hardest time getting placed anywhere else and give us that one. That's what love looks like. I work with lots of people, as you can imagine, in various life struggles. And occasionally this means that I have to unexpectedly and suddenly leave my house in the evening, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes come back from vacation so that I can support and care for somebody that's in crisis. It doesn't happen all the time anymore because we have other people on our staff and we kind of spread that out, but it still happens. And when it does, when I meet with that person, they always feel bad about it. They always do. And I never act like it was nothing because that wouldn't be true. I mean, seriously, it cost me something. It cost me time with my family, and the next day's schedule might get messed up, and other meetings might have to get moved, so other calendars are involved and have to be adjusted. But love is not self-seeking. It puts the needs of others first. A couple weeks ago, I messed up my back really bad, and I don't know exactly what I did. All I know is I was in severe pain. I was crumpled on the floor at the foot of my bed. I literally couldn't move. I wondered if I would ever walk again. I can be a bit dramatic. And I don't have a high tolerance for pain. I admit it, and I'm good with it. I'm comfortable with it. So finally, I didn't know what else to do. It was seriously, it was either call an ambulance or call this friend who's a part of our church who's a physical therapist, and I called him. It's late. It's really late. It's like 8:30. Anyway, so I call him, and on his cell phone, he answers. He says, "Hey man, how's it going?" And I said, "I'm in trouble." And I told him about my problem, and then I said, before he could talk, I said, "Man, I hate calling you. I hate calling you. It's after hours. You've already worked all day, and I feel like I'm taking advantage of you." And he just shut that down. He would not have it. He said, "Look, man, this is what friends do. We care about each other. I care about you. This is what we do for each other." And he gave me some relief that night, and then the next day met me at his place and got me obviously upright again and fully mobile and no pain and all that stuff. But did it cost him something? Yes, it did. And yet love is not self-seeking. It puts the needs of others first. When I find myself acting selfishly, I can be 100% positive that I am not acting lovingly, because love is never selfish. They cannot go together. One important note about this: I don't have to feel like behaving selflessly. I just have to actually do it. This is about action and attitude. It's not about feeling. Love is always an action. It's how we treat each other. It's how we behave. Emotions are fleeting. They come and go. In the context of living side by side, it means I put the needs of other people above my own, where there's nothing in it for me except the benefit of the one that I love, where there's nothing in it for you except the benefit of the one that you say you love, sometimes even at great cost to you. Now, we can't leave this part of the love definition without talking about the greatest demonstration of it that the world has ever seen. Jesus Christ, who we are clearly told loves us, took on brutal torture and death precisely because of his love for us. That was his motive. Elsewhere, Paul tells us this. He says, God demonstrated his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So you and I, we have an example to follow. To live side by side well, we have to love each other without it being self-seeking. This doesn't always require tons of sacrifice, but it sometimes, maybe often does. So here's the question. How are you deploying the most excellent gift, the gift of love, in an others-focused way? And by the way, I'm talking to you, not the person next to you. So don't elbow somebody and don't lean over and whisper and say, "Man, you really need to listen to this. You need this." Think about you. How are you deploying this most excellent gift in an others-focused way? Secondly, love keeps no record of wrongs. Now, I don't know about you, but I like keeping score. And if I could be so bold, I think most of us like keeping score, and we even do it sort of privately and secretly. We do it in the name of fun. My team beat your team, by 5 points, or a base hit, or a touchdown, or 4 seconds, or 6 baskets, or 2 strokes on the 18th hole, or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with a little friendly competition. I mean, it's part of what makes life exciting, right? That's cool. In fact, though, we develop a scorecard elsewhere too, off the field. If we're honest, we admit that we do this at home, don't we? We count how many times I cook, or I make the bed, or I take the kids to school, or I do the homework, or I clean the bathroom, or whatever it is. We count offenses, like how many times you worked late, how many times you were short with me, how many times you dropped the ball. We try to measure the scales and see how they balance when it comes to letting each other down, and they almost always strangely balance in my favor. That's how scorekeeping works. It's like me playing a game with my 4-year-old granddaughter, Kinsley, who always manages to win even when she loses. Our scorekeeping miraculously always keeps me up a few points over you. We're especially good at scorekeeping when it comes to society too. We even like to keep score, don't we? Getting justice, watching other people get justice when they were wrong, that can be fun and exhilarating. I read about this Canadian musician. His name was Dave Carroll. True story. He was a few years ago, he was on a United Airlines flight, and he went to get his baggage and discovered that his really nice Taylor guitar worth like $3,500 had been badly damaged in the transport process. And so he immediately went to report it. He had it in his hand, he could prove it, and he was treated rudely by 3 United Airlines workers, and his claim was officially denied. And so he appealed it, and it was denied, and he appealed it again, and it was denied. So finally, Carol, who's a performer and a songwriter, decided to write a song about it. He titled the song United Breaks Guitars. Immediately, the song went viral. It was the #1 song on iTunes that week. It also became public humiliation for United Airlines, which saw its stock drop 10%. Shareholders lost $180 million. Now, eventually, United caved and offered to pay for the guitar, but by that time, it was way too late. The damage was done. And I don't know about you, but I read that story and I found myself cheering for Dave Carroll and booing United Airlines. And if I'm really honest, I'm living kind of vicariously through it because we all keep score. And that might be well enough. It might be okay when it comes to, the big bad corporation and the federal government, but scorekeeping never works if you want to live side by side in a healthy community. The phrase keeps no record, when Paul says love keeps no record of wrongs, he uses a Greek word that is an accounting word. It's a bookkeeping word. And I can relate to that. My background is in finance and accounting, and I was trained to keep meticulous financial records, and here's the thing, I was trained to never throw them away. Now, I know most of us, we keep our tax returns and supporting stuff for 3 years. That's what we're told to do. But I've got every receipt for everything I've ever done going back for decades. Now, I'm not a hoarder. I was just trained like an accountant. And accountants keep meticulous records, and they never throw them away. There's a reason for that. It's pretty good practice if you want to stay out of the crosshairs of an IRS auditor, but it is a terrible strategy for community. If we want to live side by side well, we have to love each other in a way that burns the records of wrongs instead of storing them. 30 years ago, I briefly ran a construction company for a friend of mine, and one of our employees was this young woman who struggled off and on with addiction. And towards the end of my time there, she came to me one day. We had this job lined up for her, and she asked me to give her an advance on it. Well, that wasn't company policy, but I wanted to help her out, so I did. I gave her $800 of my own money, and then she vanished, completely disappeared. I didn't see her. She didn't do the job. I had to pay somebody else to do the job with the company money. I was out the $800. And for a while, I was pretty mad about it. I was really mad about it, if I'm honest. It churned and stewed inside of me, and I talked about it all the time. And yet, I started to become convicted about this. I'm always trying to hear the voice of God. I hope you're doing that too. And in the process, I'm telling God he needs to find her, smite her, find some other biblical word, And I keep hearing God say, hey man, love keeps no record of wrongs. That's the text that God just kept burdening my heart with. And the truth is I was never going to advance her any more money, but eventually I had to realize you got to let this $800 go. You just got to let it go. A few years later, and I did. So I did. I've completely released that. In my mind, in my heart, we were good. And a few years later, she showed up at our church. She wasn't looking for me. It was, I think, coincidence. And she just wanted to know God. She had long ago broken free from her addiction, and she was seeking spiritual truth now. I don't think she remembered the money, and I didn't care. In fact, the truth is she no longer owed it to me because the ledger got burned, because love keeps no record of wrongs. By the way, since then, we've baptized her, we've dedicated her kids, and now she's passing the blessing of knowing Jesus onto other people. Now look, there are consequences to our poor decisions, mine and yours, and there's a price to pay when we mess up. I get that. But we deal with it. We suffer through it, and then we put it behind us. So I'm asking you to think about the language that you use. If you're constantly bringing up the past, if you're still holding long ago actions against other people, if you're constantly confessing age-old sins, you might have an accounting problem. Get the problem on the table, deal with it, put it behind you, and close the books forever. So where are you keeping score? And how can you burn the ledger? Because love, true love, keeps no record of wrongs. One last component, love loves truth. Love loves truth. Paul said, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth, or is happy with truth. And I find this a fascinating way to put it, because Paul contrasts truth with evil. Not truth with lying, we would get that. Not truth with falsehood, we would understand that. But truth with evil, as in the opposite of the truth is. And that's pretty bold. And I think he means it to be, because love does not exist apart from truth. To exist side by side and to do it well, we have to be willing to receive truth and to give truth. Now, this is important, and you don't have to agree with me, but in real community with the people that I've really decided are going to be community with me, I don't withhold, I disclose. I don't withhold, I disclose. The people I put around my life have both the explicit invitation from me and the responsibility to tell me the truth about me. Now, I might disagree with their assessment, and that's okay, and I still get to make my own decision, right? But if my closest friends are not allowed to point out a critical issue that they see in me, who will? Seriously, I don't always see myself in a clear and honest way. I need this. I don't want to live in a community where everybody talks about me. I want people who say they love me to say the truth to me. And I want to be able to reciprocate. I want them to be able to hear from me from time to time. That's the way this really works. So, you're in a small group, and there's a couple, and you notice that one of the people in this couple doesn't treat the other in a completely honoring way, whatever that means. And so here's what you do. You ask for some time, one-on-one, and then you ask for permission. And I've done this like 1,000 times. And people have done it with me too. And it goes something like this. Hey, the reason I wanted to talk with you is because I love you and I care about you, and I see something in you that I was thinking you might not be aware of and that you would want to know. And I'm asking if you're willing to let me share that with you. I always do it like that. And I know some of you are listening to this right now and you're thinking, I would crawl under a rock and throw up. There's no way I am ever having this conversation. I get it. I know it's scary. And if I'm being honest, it's not always received well, but almost always it is. If love is not self-seeking, and if love loves truth, then you take the risk and you put the needs of the other person above your own, and you speak truth into their life. Now, you always acknowledge at the end of the day, they don't have to agree with you, and that's okay. You're not responsible for the final decision. You are responsible for loving them with truth. People have done this for me, and I'm better because of it. And I've done it for others. And side by side, we're better together. So, who do you need to ask to speak truth into your life? Who around you needs to hear truth from you? There's a lot more. I mean, really so much more. And this is really worth you spending some time with. People come to church, I hope, wanting to get a little better. I'm trying to help you do that. I'm trying to do that too. So if we could all just find a way to take a step or two, just a step or two to become more loving people, loving the way that Paul defines it here, you will find that everything starts to reset in a good way. At home, at work, in your neighborhood, in our communities, in our church. Side by side, we can do this better. So I'm going to ask you to do this. Right now, at every one of our campuses, you had a card when you came in. It's either below your seat, or it was in your seat, or in the pocket in front of your seat, or somewhere. There's a card. And look, we're not going to put anybody on the spot here. It's not going to get weird. I promise. I love you too much for that. So get your card out, and I want you just to hold it up with me. We're not going to write anything yet. But you'll notice that at the top in bold is the scripture that I read for you a few minutes ago. I'm going to ask us at every campus to read this out loud with me. We're going to read it out loud together, just the bold part. And then I'm going to pray for us, and then we'll have just a quick exercise before we go home, okay? So here we go. We're going to read it together. Here we go. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or conceited or proud. Love is not ill-mannered or selfish or irritable. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. Love is not happy with evil, but is happy with truth. Love never gives up. Its faith, hope, and patience never fail. Love is eternal. God, we're so thankful that you love us. So thankful that you love us enough to demonstrate every one of these qualities through the power and the love of Jesus, who you sent to rescue us, laying his own life down so that we could live. And then, God, asking us to deploy your love through us towards others so that the whole world might see and want what we have. May we be faithful to love each other. May we be faithful today to just take a step or two in loving each other better. Help us to demonstrate what you demonstrated, real love. Through the power and the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
These words.
The words on these cards are powerful. Imagine how different our world would be if we all lived side by side like this. Now, we can't change the whole world or really anyone else, but each one of us can change ourselves. So let's take a step right now. Before we leave and get caught up in the business of the week, read through the words from 1 Corinthians 13 again. And this time, reflect on how you're doing. In what ways are you loving others well? Underline those words. In what ways is God nudging you to love others more fully? Circle those words. Commit to keep loving well in some ways and to take a step toward loving better in another way this week. Now, you can get your card at our website or just click on the link in the chat. Let's live out love side by side. We'll see you next week.
Oh, it's moving on my mountains. It's perfect love. It's casting out my fear. How great this love. Oh, it welcomes me like fame.